Now that we've met some important strategies, how are they taught? In this last section, we will touch on this, as well as strategies and activities for after reading. In her book, Strategies That Work, Stephanie Harvey uses a selection from a trade book for children or an entire picture book as part of an anchor lesson to actually introduce a strategy to students. She chooses a selection that facilitates the use of a given strategy. For example, if the target strategy is visualization, it would make sense to use a book that has a great deal of imagery and allows for vivid imaging. If the strategy focus is question generating, then a selection which inspires a lot of questions would be best. If the strategy is making inferences, she might use a book by the children's author Chris Van Allsburg, whose books often foster the art of making inferences. As she thinks aloud, she often uses post-its in the book and documents her thinking with brief comments. A document camera is a great tool to help with this. The sticky notes become footprints of her thinking through the text. Students are encouraged to follow suit as they practice the strategy with a partner and eventually independently. Post-its can be left in place, or the students can place them in their reading journals. The sticky notes become a timeline of their thinking and often prompt and support group discussions. These sticky notes and journals also act as a mini assessment for teachers to guide them in determining student use and understanding of the strategy, which in turn can guide instruction. Reciprocal teaching is one approach to helping children practice and internalize the use of 4 major strategies listed here. In the 1980s, 2 researchers, Palenskar and Brown, identified 4 major strategies that good readers use: predicting before and during reading, question generating, clarifying, and summarizing. Predicting is done before reading as children preview the text and use their background knowledge to make predictions, as well as during reading. The reader predicts what he thinks the author will say next, and this should change to reflect new information as he reads. It makes children active readers and gives them a purpose to continue reading. Question generating spurs a student on to keep reading as well, in order to answer questions that arise, but it also is a check on comprehension. As was said earlier, if a child can't ask a well-formed question, then perhaps he has not fully comprehended the text to that point. Clarifying is an excellent tool for targeting and dealing with confusing information that hinders comprehension. Finally, summarizing is also an ongoing strategy. Being unable to paraphrase information or events is an indication of a failure to construct meaning, at which point a fix-up strategy needs to be employed. Summarizing is also a springboard for another prediction. Of course, instruction in each of these strategies needs to be given first. Once students are familiar with them, they can practice them in a group setting. Smaller groups, of course, work better and facilitate discussion. Where the teacher might lead the discussions initially, she gradually turns the reins over to a student leader who facilitates the discussion, where children are reminded to employ these strategies as they read and discuss a selection together. The Houghton Mifflin Reading Program, Invitation to Literacy, had a unique approach to encouraging children to use the 4 reading strategies noted in reciprocal teaching. The 4 strategies are introduced early on in the series. Although children are encouraged to always use a variety of strategies, including and beyond these 4, the authors of the program would highlight one particular strategy as the focus for each given selection. Imagine the amount of practice that students would get with these key strategies over the course of their elementary careers while using this series. You could easily adopt this policy for strategy instruction with your students, even if you're not using the Houghton Mifflin series. The first step, of course, would be to introduce various strategies as described earlier. But after this is done, consider the possibilities for targeting a strategy for practice. This could be at any time, with any text, with any strategy, with any reading situation. For example, during a dear time, drop everything and read, students might be reminded to make predictions as they read, or today our focus is summarizing as we read. Then, when the dear time is ended, encourage children to talk about and share the predictions they made or the summaries that were made. When given a selection that everyone is reading, the teacher might highlight a particular strategy that might prove especially helpful and make this the focus strategy for the selection. For example, if the text is The Stranger by Chris Van Allsburg, what better strategy to focus on than inferencing? Strategies are most effective when integrated with each other and throughout the reading process, as shown by this quote from Presley and others. However, strategies are not learned overnight, and as we said earlier, they are constantly evolving to meet the demands of more complex texts and deeper interaction with selections. Well, you have guided students through pre-reading activities and strategies to prepare them to read, supported their use of during reading strategies as they read, and now they've finished the selection. What's next? A major post-reading activity that we are probably most familiar with, both as students and as educators, is questioning. Why do we need questions? And the answer is, questioning facilitates comprehension. What you ask about is what children learn. Higher-level questioning that demands that students integrate information in the text will promote deeper processing and therefore more learning and better remembering than questions that require recall of specific facts only. This is what every child hopes, that he's got the right answers for your questions. Here are some tips for planning the right questions ahead of time. There are essentially 3 levels of questions: the literal ones that check on children's basic understanding of the selections, the who, what, when, where, and how questions, which are usually asked first. And once this is established so the children have an accurate grasp of the important elements of the selection, then interpretive questions can be asked. These often require students to make connections between pieces of information from the text and/or with their own prior knowledge. Then questions that ask students to apply what they have read takes things to another, more advanced level. Remember that we all need time to reflect, so be sure to pause to give students a chance to collect their thoughts. Also, allowing them to think pair share with an elbow buddy gives them an opportunity to consider and practice their response beforehand. Using a closed procedure, much as you saw with the paragraph about Ford, is another means to check comprehension. There are a lot of advantages to using a closed procedure to check comprehension, but here are just a few. Sequencing is often a challenging task for students, but here are 2 concrete methods that may support students who struggle. The first is rainbow sequencing, or using color coding to sequence events. The second is bookmark sequencing, in which students actually create bookmarks with given events, locate the event in the selection, and place the bookmark at that page. Sequence is easy now because the bookmarks indicate each event and where it actually occurred in the selection. This strategy is a great way to encourage children to go back into the text to find a home for each bookmark event. Gunning presents an extensive description of after-reading activities. There are also an assortment of other post-reading activities presented as part of an assignment within this module, so please be on the lookout for all these activities. Here is one final suggestion about an excellent resource that was mentioned in this PowerPoint that you might want to explore.